Hey, how you doing? My name is Brad Harrison, Bradharrison. I'm here today to ask Daniel Cameron and to request that a special prosecutor be assigned to the Breonna Taylor investigation. We do not feel that Daniel Cameron gave an honest effort in this investigation to represent the life of Breonna Taylor. The grand jury hearing was heavily weighted to favor law enforcement. This was not the goal of the investigation. If you listen to the grand jury recordings, it gives a version. It plays the PIU investigation, which is basically internal affairs. It plays the statements that officers gave to PIU. It gives the grand jurors the perception through the law enforcement investigators' eyes. It's a police narrative. The entire grand jury proceeding was a narrative of the LMPD officers that were on the scene that night. Furthermore, one of the most egregious acts that occurred during this investigation is that Daniel Cameron did not include the investigation leading up to the search warrant. The grand jurors heard nothing about that. In fact, Daniel Cameron says that part of the investigation has been passed to the FBI. The entire investigation was flawed from the beginning. And I'll give you an example. During the press conference, Daniel Cameron made a false statement about the investigation. Daniel Cameron and Sergeant John Mattingly both claim that Mattingly was not a part of the initial investigation that led to the search warrant. That is false. And we have evidence that that is false. Daniel Cameron had evidence that that is false. Daniel Cameron states at 7 minutes and 22 seconds into his press conference, Daniel Cameron says Sergeant Mattingly and Detective Cosgrove and Hankerson, Sergeant Mattingly and Detectives Cosgrove and Hankerson had no involvement in the preceding investigation or obtainment of the search warrant. They were called into duty as extra personnel to effectuate the service of the warrant. They only had information conveyed to them during their prior briefing. However, during the course of this investigation, PIU interviewed one of the SWAT detectives. This entire investigation was a farce. You had 5 search warrants. You had 5 no-knock search warrants requested by Detective Joshua James, who has seemed to escape public criticism, but he should be the main person on trial here. But you had Detective Joshua James, who apparently led this investigation or was instrumental in leading this investigation. Joshua James is the person that signed the affidavit for 5 search warrants for Judge Mary Shaw. Joshua James is also the person that listed on the search warrant that the U.S. Postal Inspectors determined that there were suspicious packages or packages containing drugs going to Breonna Taylor's apartment. That is false. And I give you this statement here from SWAT. SWAT investigators were not aware of Breonna Taylor's apartment being searched. SWAT typically handles the raids at these no-knock search warrants. So what these detectives did was they wanted to do 6 or 7 search warrants at one time. They contacted SWAT. SWAT said no. SWAT said no. That's too many to do at one time. We'll do 2 one day, 2 another day, and 2 a following day. So they agreed to do 2 search warrants on Elliott Street. SWAT prepares. SWAT does their own briefing because they said they don't trust LMPD's detectives. Often they're told that there's no kids and dogs in the home. They find there's kids and dogs there. So SWAT gets the information about a month out. They go out, they carry out their investigations, and then they proceed. SWAT is aware of the 2 homes on Elliott Street. The night of March 12th, SWAT proceeds to Elliott Street. They enter the 2 houses on Elliott. They're approximately 2 to 3 minutes into their entry, and they hear over the radio that there's shots fired out on Springfield Drive, which is Breonna Taylor's apartment. They have no idea this raid on Springfield Drive was taking place because the 7 officers under Joshua James did not inform them. They raid Breonna Taylor's apartment. They hear shots fired. They leave Elliott to go assist. They arrive on the scene 20 minutes later. When SWAT leaves the investigation, they leave. They stay at the crime scene maybe 20 minutes, get it cleared, and they talk amongst themselves, and they're immediately suspicious. They thought something bad happened there. So during the PIU investigation, SWAT commander gave this statement. He said, wait a minute, let me get to this statement.
Sure, live.
Back in the beginning of the investigation, back in January, Sergeant Mattingly he asked Sergeant Sawyer and Kuzma of the Shively Police Department to inquire about packages going to Breonna Taylor's apartment. The Postal Service relayed the information that the address had no package history. On 2 separate occasions, they were asked. Shively Police was asked on 2 separate occasions by Mattingly and another detective under the instruction of Joshua James to ask the postal inspector about packages going to this house. On both occasions, the postal inspector said the house had no package history. This is important because Sergeant Mattingly is participating in the investigation leading up to the search warrant. But Daniel Cameron and Mattingly claim that he did not have any participation in that investigation. Therefore, they didn't even investigate the part of why the search warrant was obtained. Bottom line is, these officers should not have been at Breonna Taylor's home. They gave false information to get these search warrants. These search warrants were obtained illegally. Judge Mary Shaw may not have issued the search warrants without the information regarding the packages coming from the post office. On the search warrant, Joshua James wrote that they determined from the postal inspector there were suspicious packages containing drugs going to that residence for Jamarcus Glover. That is totally false. This investigation, the grand jury hearings, should have included the information leading up to the search warrants, being that Mattingly took place in this. This appears that you have a rogue group of officers, maybe 7 or 8 officers, that have their own team that do what they want to do. They did not inform SWAT of what was taking place because it is my assumption that something suspicious was taking place. Now I looked at, I saw when Mayor Fisher announced that they were doing changes to LMPD with the Breonna Taylor settlement. He announced there were changes. One of those changes, if you look at it, was the chain of command of how they collect money. That was one of the big changes. There's a chain of command now of how they collect money. So I asked myself, what did money have to do with this? It appears to me that these officers may be going out to Breonna Taylor's apartment, assuming that Jamarcus Glover had cash out there. Why would they not include SWAT in the raid? Why 2 minutes before going to her apartment, they sent EMS away? Because I believe these 7 officers were going there to rob Breonna Taylor's home. We asked for we asked for a special prosecutor to be appointed to investigate the full information regarding the Breonna Taylor investigation. No disrespect to Daniel Cameron, but I feel there's a bias there. When Daniel Cameron was running for office, he was endorsed by the FOP. When you have law enforcement under investigation, possibly under criminal charges, an attorney general that represents the FOP should not be heading the investigation. Thank you, people.
So we have to be clear, because we are the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist